Okay. My name is Stevie Pettigo. I appreciate you guys inviting me to come and do a presentation. Like the other guy said, we started in 1989 as well, and all these oil spills, the first chance we were ever doing the testing and actually any field use for the product. If you would go to the next slide. In the early 90s, and since Region 9 covers a lot of California, I've got a lot of California information on this presentation. In the early 2000s, OSEI was actually used by the U.S. Navy in San Diego Bay on over 200 spills. Steve Fryer had alerted the EPA that not only had they used it, but they used it with whales and dolphins around, and not one time did they ever see any adverse effect to any marine species. Next slide. Like I said, we've been doing this since 1989. Just every February we do a census on how many spills roughly we're addressing. As of now, we've cleaned up, or OSEI has been a part of over 35,000 cleanups domestically and globally. The U.S. military was one of our biggest users predominantly. All 5 branches have used it. It's been used on over 195 bases domestically and worldwide since 1990. We also have a letter from OSHA that states OSEI is non-toxic to humans. And then more than that, if you look at a lot of the videos on our website, you will see me handling OSEI myself. A lot of our guys run their hands through the stream. I've been handling OSEI personally for 27 years now, and I'm still here. OSEI is used by major oil companies around the world, one of the biggest being the biggest oil company in the world, Aramco, in Saudi Arabia. Next slide. This is just an idea. OSEI is approved, has an official approval letter from 24 countries. We have 6 pending right now. Should be 30 by the end of September. Just like in the U.S., we present our information, our testing, our toxicity, case histories, and eventually they'll give us the testing to do. We'll fulfill that testing and get approved. So we have official 24 letters right now from foreign countries. OSEI is used. This is just a few of them. It's used in over 80 countries consistently and has been used in over 101 countries. Next slide. How it works. OSEI is a first response bioremediation product. It is not a bacteria. It doesn't put any foreign bacteria in the ecosystem, and it's not a nutrient. So it's a first response bioremediation process that has biosurfactants, enzymes, and nutrients. Basically what OSEI does is rapidly, it enables indigenous bacteria to utilize a toxic oil as a food source quickly. And the endpoint with all bioremediation, of course, is CO2 and water. Next slide. What happens when you apply OSEI on a water spill? The biosurfactants attack the molecular structure and break it down to where the oil looks like it disappears before your eyes. It really doesn't disappear. It's just in very, very small particles called micelles. And once the biosurfactants do their job on the oil, several things become true rapidly. The oil is caused to float. It will not allow it to sink it in the water column, spreading the impact of the oil to a secondary area. The adhesion properties of the oil is diminished, so it will not stick to even marsh grass or vegetation. The flammability of fuels, in 3 minutes, if you would have a spill of gasoline or diesel on the concrete, you spray OSEI on it, in 3 minutes you can't light it with a road torch. Then the second part of the product is we have enzymes, over 156 different types of enzymes. And the reason being is you have various chain hydrocarbons. And you must have a way to catalyze all the hydrocarbon chains, or predominantly all of them, if you want to break that oil down and get the bacteria to utilize the food source quickly. So the enzymes actually catalyst to speed up the bioremediation processes. OSEI also has a nutrient system. It will rapidly grow the indigenous bacteria that is mixed with OSE2. Let me digress. You mix OSE2 with natural water. If it's an inland spill, you'll mix it with fresh water and you'll enhance freshwater bacteria. If it's an ocean spill, you'll mix it with ocean water and you'll enhance ocean water bacteria or saltwater bacteria. When the bacteria runs out of the OSE2 nutrients, it converts over to the detoxified hydrocarbons via the catalyst, the enzyme, and then converts it rapidly to CO2 and water. What we'd like to point out to people, OSE2 emulates Mother Nature's own process, except it will remediate generally a medium weight crude oil from anywhere 14 to 30 days when Mother Nature may take 30 to 50 years, depending on where it's spilled at. Next slide. OSE2 has been tested by OSE2 in the early 90s through NETAP and found it to be non-toxic. OSE2, as I pointed out, is safe for humans, animals, plants, and marine life. It doesn't require any special handling or protective equipment. There are guys that clean up oil spills on the water almost every day with no gloves, goggles, or PPE suits with OSE2. OSE2 can be applied in situ, ex situ, depending on the situation and the scenario. Next slide. OSE2 is listed on the National Contingency Plan for oil spills. We're the only product listed under EA type, so we're not like the other products. We have our own separate listing, and what we've basically found out globally is we're basically the only enzymatic product that works as a first response oil spill cleanup product in the world. And as I pointed out, all 5 branches have used OSE2, been used on over 195 bases. And by the way, and anybody that wants a copy of this, I'll email you a copy of the presentation. And we put the URLs in here for you to follow up and see exactly where these citations are. Next slide. As I stated, OSE2 has been tested by the U.S. EPA through NETAP, which is the testing they developed to get products on the NCP list for bioremediation. The very first test they did, they showed a 98% reduction in 28 days, and that was both on aromatics and alkanes. Something they weren't specifically proud of, OSE2 has had 35 toxicity tests done on it. The EPA, Environment Canada, UK, Australia, and other countries. The average LC50 or LD50 for OSE2 is 1900 or above. In the BP scale, the EPA stated that anything 100 ppm and greater is virtually non-toxic. 1900 were way above virtually non-toxic. Environment Canada also did testing on rainbow trout and nearshore bacteria, and the rainbow trout LC50 is 10,000 ppm. So OSE2 is extremely non-toxic. One of the other great tests that we have is the country of Australia required us to do ecotoxicity and endocrine disrupting tests, and it was so non-toxic they immediately approved us for their about 2 years ago. So we don't have any endocrine disruption problems with OSE2 as well. Next slide. This is just a list that we've been doing cleanups every year. We'll put 2 or 3 of the bigger projects that we've done on our list, and we can send anybody the complete list all the way to 216 now. Next slide. This is Region 9, and it deals with California. Recently, a year ago, there's an AT&T building in San Jose, California. It's got a groundwater problem. They supply all of Silicon Valley with fiber optics, so they could not do any digging. So they had to find a way and find a product to inject into the groundwater, approximately 4 million gallons of groundwater. So California Water Board allowed the pilot study with OSE2 a year ago. The groundwater starts at 19 feet and goes down to about 28 feet. Next slide. Like I said, we have all the URLs. You can track what's going on in the site with OSE2 from the URL up there. And this has more information about the history of the site. They've been trying to clean it up since 1990. This has more information about the history of the site. They've been trying to clean it up since 1996. Next slide. This is Chicago Region Iron is doing the project. This is their quarterly, progress report to California Water Board. Go to the next slide. As you can see up there, CDI is talking about completing injections of the bioremediation catalyst OSE2 into the subsurface water. That test turned out so well and cleaned it up so effective that they're now going to do the entire site, and they'll start those injections in December or January, December this year, January of next year. And it's quite a large area to clean up underground. Next slide. This is just some of the pictures of the site when they were injecting OSE2, and they were using geoprobes in various areas to inject OSE2 to address a portion of this cleanup underground. Next slide. This is just, I mentioned that the U.S. military bases use a lot of this. This is another one. This is Walnut Grove, Missouri. This groundwater cleanup was just done. A pipeline broke. The oil ran down into fissures under the rock. They couldn't clean it up. They injected OSE2 in June. Within 20 days, not only did it clean the spill up, but it cleaned it up to drinking water standards. Next slide. This is DEQ in Montana. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. And this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Maelstrom Air Force Base to inject OSE2. This is just their approval to inject OSE2 into two sites. It's basically one site, but they split it into two names. Part of it's Maelstrom Air Force Base, and part of it is the Missile Defense Base. Next slide. this is where this is showing some of the injection points they use at Malcolm Air Force Base to inject OSE2. 90% of this site is now clean. The groundwater is cleaned with OSE2. They still have one building they need to inject OSE2 under. Next slide. Since we're talking about intertidal zones and emergency response, this was a study that was actually done with Chevron and the American Petroleum Institute in the early 90s. And this was from a bulk fuel terminal in Tacoma, Washington. And Chevron actually had they built the burns, they brought in the contaminated soil and set it on the plastic, and then OSE2 was added. Okay, next slide. And you see it started at, the one part they tested started at 1800, and in 80 days, this stuff that had been there for 60 years was remediated to 10. And so we went well below the level they had to reach to get a closure level. Next slide. Oh, by the way, that site was, when the tide would come in, it was influenced with ocean water. So we actually mixed ocean water with OSE2 to apply to those burn sites. It started at, the one part they tested started at 1800, and in 80 days, this stuff that had been there for 60 years was remediated to 10. And so we went well below the level they had to reach to get a closure level. Oh, by the way, that site was, when the tide started at, the one part they tested started at 1800, and in 80 days, this stuff that had been there for 60 years was remediated to 10. And so we went well below the level they had to reach to get a closure level. Next slide. Oh, by the way, that site was, when the tide started at, the one part they tested started at 1800, and in 80 days, this stuff that had been there for 60 years was remediated to 10. And so we went well below the level they had to reach to get a closure level. Next slide. Oh, by the way, that site was, when the tide would come in, it was influenced with ocean water. So we actually mixed ocean water with OSE2 to apply to those burn sites. This is another site. This is 29 Palms, California. They had a big pile of tank washout, JP4, JP5, JP8, and diesel. We gave them the protocol to put it out on plastic. California Water Board approved the use of OSE2. You can see them mixing it and applying it. And you can see that within, I think it was maybe a couple of months, it went down just under 600. The target level they had to get to was 600 ppm. So the Marines got a legal closure letter on this site. Next slide. As I stated, OSE2 has been used on spills around the world. The Ogoniland spill in Nigeria is one of the biggest spills in the world or on the globe. Chevron did some initial testing with windrows, and they measured the top and the bottom, and they showed a 95% and 97% reduction, respectively, which then caused them to start utilizing OSE2 through our contractor GOE Global in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. And this spill, it's actually covering over 500,000 acres. Next slide. Go down. You can actually see some of the before and after with OSE2, and of course, they have to do all the before and after testing, and we have tests to go with all these pictures that shows that OSE2 met the standards that the Nigerian government requires. So far, 6 major sites have been cleaned up in the Ogoniland with OSE2, and we're getting ready to start 2 more large areas over there. Next slide. And once again, it's just talking about they measured the top of the soil and they also measured it at the bottom, and you have a 97 and 95% reduction in 21 days respectively. They even measured PAHs and even got a higher rate of reduction on those. I would imagine some of the stuff left on the top and the bottom, that it was probably some longer chain hydrocarbons that given a few more days it would have remediated those as well. Next slide. This is one of my favorite cleanups to depict to people, because I'm quite sure it's the only depiction of bioremediation actually doing what someone says their product will do on an emergency spill. This was a 5,000 gallon spill in Electra, Texas. It pipeline broke, it ran into this pond. The wind was blowing out of the south, so we trapped all the oil on the north side of the pond. We went around and sprayed the edges on the south. We then started spraying OSE2, and as you can see on the picture on the left, immediately when you start applying OSE2, the oil will start breaking down, and then you lift up off the sand, and it'll lift off the marsh grass. And then it sits there floating until it remediates the CO2 and water. And in fact, this picture right here, this little white patch, this is bacteria starting to grow in the oil. And then as time progressed, it spread out through the entire oil. And then at about 16 days, it looked like this. And what that's a depiction of is, as the oil went away, the bacteria was fighting for the only remnants of the food source left, which was this oil. And so it clumped up, and it got little cotton balls all over this. And then in 18 days, there was no oil left. PCEQ had Texaco go and do sediment testing to make sure nothing was on the bottom and wasn't on there, and they got a closure letter. The biggest thing that Texaco, the biggest relief they had is that there were no fish killed, no turtles, no snakes, and they were all over the place. So that oil was lifted off the marsh grass, it was caused to float, no impact on the water column, which didn't impact any of the marine species, and then it remediated on the top with no harm and no natural resource damages. Next slide. As I pointed out, one of the very first tests that was ever done was by Dr. Brown, University of Alaska Fairbanks in Alaska. He graded the product, he gave it to Exxon to look at. Exxon ended up hiring him, and they tested it in February of 1990 in Florham Park, New Jersey, which is a big lab they used to have. And Dr. Brown called us and he said they tested the 21 best products they can find in the world, and there's nothing within 90% of the effectiveness of OSE2. Next slide. This is just some graphs of how OSE2 reacts to some different types of oils. Weathered benzoylene oil is about the heaviest stuff you can find. It's somewhat even more heavier than bumper seed. They make roofing tar out of it. It just gives you an idea of some of the types of oils and fuels that OSE2 has been used on and cleaned up in the laboratory. Next slide. By the way, on our website, we have a 223-page technical library that has about $2.6 million worth of tests in it. And you can go through and see some of the old tests and case studies we have in there. This is a document that we're quite proud of. We've put together. It's all kinds of test links to our product. One of the more important ones is the first one. A couple of years ago, RRT6 came to me and asked me to sit on their science council. They were down in Mike Depoliopoli, I can't really say his name. And they wanted to update their information on bioremediation. So they gave me some parameters, and I wrote this document. It was actually presented at the American Academy of Science 2 years ago. And it's the 3 types of bioremediation and mode of action. So if you want to see why nutrients are limited or bacteria products are limited, this is a good document to explain that. And it goes further into the mode of action of OSE2 as well. And it was well accepted by RRT6. One of the other more important things we've done is this. We gave the King Fog University of Petroleum and Mineral Institute all our information, and they peer reviewed it. And the conclusion of their peer review stated that this product should be used on all spills in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on soil and water. And they do that now. And then as you go through this, you can see just all different kinds of tests that we've carried out with different universities, different environmental agencies in the U.S. and globally. Next slide. This is just more of the testing. This was an interesting test here. U.S. Department of Interior did a comparison between OSE2, corrects at 9527 and 9500, and they did it on dielectric oil, which is the oil that's in the big wind turbines, and this was basically done for the people in Nantucket. And what they found out is that in 30 days, OSE2 had remediated 67% of the oil, and neither one of the corrects has remediated anything. Next slide. There's just more tests for you to see, and then our 35 toxicity tests. Next slide. In June of this year, I did another presentation for the American Academy of Science, and it was basically, because we have so much experience with spills, it came to us that we really think there's three main considerations that anybody ought to look at when you're going to clean up a spill. And the first one and foremost is it's safe for humans. In other words, if you need to wear a PPE suit, goggles, and gloves, it's probably not something we ought to put in our environment. The second thing is it's safe for aquatic marine life. And with our product, as you've seen, and you can go and review all the tests, our average LC50 is well above the virtually non-toxic level. So it's not going to hurt marine life. And then the third thing, and this is in keeping with the Clean Water Act, does it actually remove oil from the environment? In other words, it doesn't just sink it or hide it, and it's there forever. Does it actually remove it? And mechanical cleanup will remove a little bit, but not a whole lot. OSEI II will remove it, and I'll show you further how big an impact it can have on a major spill. And basically, this is just the purpose to make sure it's safe for humans, safe for the marine environment, and it's actually removed at some point. That people spend a lot of money cleaning up spills, and we're doing a cost analysis right now, and we know the Refugio spill, they spent somewhere around, for 140,000 gallon spill, about $297 million. The Kobe Marine spill a couple of years ago in the Houston Ship Channel, they spent $87 million on. And I'm going to show you a spill in just a minute where it's the same size spill where less than $1 million was spent, and in 3 weeks you couldn't tell there had ever been a spill. Okay? Next slide. Then, of course, with any spill, there's going to be subcategories addressed, like, what kind of shoreline is it on? The type, is it vegetation? Is it rocky, fine sand, or large grain sand? Is it fresh or ocean water? Next slide. Oh, go back one. Yeah. It's all fit in there. The other thing we talk about estuaries and marshes. The spill I'm alluding to, there was a spill in Nigeria. 150,000 gallon spill. It went out into the Atlantic. It came back onto the shoreline. It covered 18 kilometers of shoreline. About a third of that shoreline was covered in sensitive mangroves. It also ran up in the little creeks and rivers they had as well. They airshipped the OSEI II from Dallas. They started applying it. They shut down fishing and harvesting of the shrimp. They started applying OSEI II on the shorelines, on the mangroves, on the open water, and like I said, in 3 weeks, there were no remnants of the spill, and they did an extreme amount of testing. There's a 554-page document they put together with testing to measure the water, to measure the shore, and the water showed a 97.8 reduction, and the shoreline showed a 99.7 reduction in hydrocarbons in 3 weeks. Okay, next slide. Okay. That's,
You want to go back?
yeah. I think you went, yeah, you skipped, no, go back first.
About one more?
It's skipping, that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, go down.
All right.
Can you skip?
Keep on skipping. Just stay right here.
Yeah. Can you click on this picture?
Let's see.
It's not going to come out. See if you can click on this second one here. Or any one of those. Okay, we're good. We can't get the video to come up, but this just shows you our warehouse. We keep generally enough OSEI II in the warehouse to address a 1 million gallon spill. It can be airshipped within 24 hours anywhere in the world. We've done this, and like I said, we've done it in Nigeria. We've also done it in the Philippines and Dubai.
All right.
Okay. I guess we're not going to be able to show it, but on our website, you can actually go and watch the cleanup that they did in Nigeria. And to think that you can take a 150,000 gallon spill and apply a product on there that'll keep it up on the water column, no secondary impacts, no natural resource damages, and turn it to CO2 and water and permanently remove it from the environment in that short of time, without any adversities. And one of the videos you will see, guys, and we don't recommend this, the mud was so bad in some of the shorelines that they took off their boots after they sprayed the shoreline with OSE 2, and the oil wouldn't stick to them, and there were no toxic effects to them. So there is a way to clean up oil spills. We're doing it on a daily basis in other parts of the world. We're hoping that the U.S. comes around and starts utilizing them because it saves money, it saves natural resource damages, and it's extremely cost effective and it's safe. I spoke about this time last year with Regional Response Team 5 and 7, and at the end of the meeting, one of the nice things that they stated is, and I'm hoping you guys will move in this direction as well, is that they said, well, maybe it's finally time we start taking a look at alternatives, and especially a first response alternative like this. And so I'm hoping that I've made an impact on you guys. Like I said, if you want the PowerPoint, I will email it to you, and you can verify all the URLs and see the videos. The other guy was talking about the stuff in the BP. OSE 2 was demonstrated 14 times in the BP spill. It was also BP tested OSE 2. There were some anomalies in the test, but they showed at the end of the test that there was a 89.9% reduction in the oil and the correxit that was attached to the oil, and they verified that it had correxit with it. So we've been around a long time, we've done a lot of work, and I know you guys have lots of spills and lots of problems, but we're an easy solution for it that's readily available. OSE 2 is listed on the California Fish and Game. We're licensed by them, and we're actually approved by about 25 states in the U.S. A lot of states don't have an approval process; they just have a standard you got to meet. And so we're doing work every day here and abroad. And I appreciate you having me.